Welcome to another video of Francois Ventures into Awakening. Today, we will explore what I refer to as Eckhart's axes. I have seen multiple videos of spiritual teachers explaining the basic facets of awakening using some sort of diagram or drawings. The best description that has resonated with me is Eckhart Tolle's description of the ego horizontal axis and the self vertical axes. Note that I have never seen a video of Eckhart actually drawing these axes on paper or board, but I have seen multiple videos of him describing them. Also, I am not sure if those axes are an original idea or not that Eckhart's had himself or if they come from another source, but that is not important. What is important is the information itself and if it's useful for anyone. For me, it has been extremely useful, and that is why I want to share and explain the idea of these axes the way I currently understand them in this video. I will do my best to represent what Eckhart has described in a diagram, and then I will add some of my own thoughts or conceptualizations to his basic diagram. Note that I do not want to infer or imply that any words or ideas that I add here are from Eckhart. These added conceptualization might be wrong or misrepresented, so please let me know in the comment below if you note or see any errors or misconceptualizations or omission. First, there is the horizontal axis, referred to as the ego axis. This axis can have other names. For example, it is also referred to as the simulation or illusion. This axis represents where much of the population is currently anchored through the ego. It is a dimension where time exists and therefore can only go in one direction, that is forward. Second, the vertical axis is the self-axis. This vertical axis can also have quite a few different names. It can be named the source, the divine, the universe, spiritual, God, Allah, Atman, and many more depending on your preference. It is a timeless dimension that slides along the ego time dimension. As shown here, this dimension can go up and be above thinking or down and be below thinking. Eckhart explained that above thinking, that is the positive upright direction, is the consciousness experience that you have when you are fully awakened. You can also possibly experience this upright direction when you are fully in the now and meditating. The downward direction represents below thinking, which corresponds to the fleeting consciousness that you can feel or experience immediately before falling asleep at night, or possibly when you use drugs or alcohol or any other kind of substance abuse. The intersection or origin of these two axes is obviously the all-important now. Here are a few things that I would like to highlight using these axes. All the thoughts that you ever had or that you are having or will ever have, are all along the ego axis. They can be about the past, future or present, but since they are thoughts, it necessarily means they are all along the ego axis. To be on the vertical axis, namely the self, you cannot use the mind or thoughts. Your ego or mind need be still, and you need to sense or intuitively feel your way. In other words, you must identify your true self and be able to observe your thoughts and emotions that are generated or perceived by the ego. The now, which is the present moment, is a relentlessly moving point in time along the ego axis. It is represented here by the intersection between the ego and the self-axis. Literally everything in this reality or universe must go along with the unstoppable movement of time, no matter what, so everything moves along the ego axis. As we have just seen, the now is a point in time that represents the intersection between the self and ego axes, but I would like to zoom in on the now and display it as an area simply to be able to illustrate a few more things. In my previous video, I discussed about the 3 levels of awakening. We can use this zoom view of the now to pictorially position these various levels of awakening. Level 0 can be represented by an anchor directly attached on the ego axis. Level 2 can also be represented by an anchor, but it is attached to the self-axis. These anchors are there to represent what is your default spiritual position or location. What I mean is that if you are anchored on the ego axis, then you are what can be called in the thinking mode and fully embedded in this simulation. If you are anchored on the self-axis, then you are in the oneness and feel the peace associated with stillness, that is, no thinking and fully awakened. Level 1 can be seen as a bridge between the self and ego axes that allows you to feel or see the self on a momentary basis through meditation or stillness, since you are still anchored to the ego axis. In order for you to move your anchor from the ego axis and have it permanently cross the bridge in order to fix it to the self axis, you must experience what is called an ego death or a dark night of the souls. Recently, I have seen videos that seem to suggest that the anchor can also be made to cross the bridge by using what they called a shift. From what I understand is that a shift is kind of a slow ego death that happens over time. By slow ego death I mean that small part or portion of the ego are slowly identified and observed, and that eventually the ego gets weakened enough for the anchor to be moved from the ego axis to the self axis. Instead of using any of those terms, I prefer to use the terminology ego alignment, and I will address that point in a future video. Please comment below if you see any errors or misconceptions in this diagram. Also, do not hesitate to make any suggestions. Thank you for watching this video until the end. As always, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you find this video interesting and would like to see others. See you next time.